Alrighty, on this episode of Faith and Focus, I want to deal with a topic that I think is undergirding a lot of the things that I've been talking about on this podcast. Things that how the church functions. Even the last episode where I said, the Christian life can be kind of boring, which, I think kind of touched a nerve with some people. But I want to talk about this idea of friendship, and I want to talk about why friendship is so important and why I think we have a major problem in our not just our church culture. We've got a major problem in our culture in general when it comes to friendships. We don't know how to make friends. We don't know how to build deep friendships. We don't know how to maintain friendships. We're just very bad at this in our culture, and I'm not necessarily sure why. I mean, obviously, I've got my theories, and everyone's probably got opinions on what's going on in the world that causes us to not be super great at friendships and relationships. But I want to share just this idea that I think that this problem in our culture is something that the church has just mimicked. It's something that the church has not stressed enough. I mean, we might talk about it casually, like the idea of needing to have friends and people in the body of Christ that we can trust and talk to and stuff. But because I don't think there's been like a very massive push by the church to really teach people how to build friendships, that we as Christians, we just default to the way the culture does it. And our culture is not very good at it. So I want to talk a little bit about that and just share some thoughts, some things that have been helpful to me over the years, specifically one book in particular that was incredibly helpful to me. And just basically kind of lay out this idea and challenge you with this idea that this may be at the heart of a lot of the things that are, I want to say, wrong with the church, because, again, it's not my job to necessarily throw stones at the church or individual churches or anything like that. But I do think that a lot of our problems can kind of come out of this failure to know how to build friendships and have intimate relationships, not talking about, sexual or intimate relationships in that sense, marriage relationships, although that certainly plays a role in it as well. But I do think the church has done a poor job at seeing this as a need. We might stress a lot of the things that we should be doing as Christians, but failing and not realizing that the things that we stress to people are 99% of the time relational issues. I mean, when you think about the fruit of the Spirit, love, peace, patience, long suffering, gentleness, kindness, being meek to people, being welcoming to people, being hospitable to, all of these different things that we try to stress to people. Hey, this is what the life of Christ looks like. Many of these are relational terms. When you're being gentle, when you're a gentle person, you're gentle with other people. And so I think because we, on one hand, see these verses in Scripture and say, okay, this is what Christians ought to look like if they're living the life of Christ and they're walking according to the Spirit. This is the kind of fruit we should be expecting to see. But because, on the other hand, we have kind of been crippled by not really knowing how to have friendships or intimate relationships, we don't really know how to live these things out. So then what ends up happening is the fruit of the Spirit ends up kind of becoming artificial, because we don't really have the relationships to live them out in. We just consider niceness and gentleness and love as just being, friendly, having a friendly demeanor, and you should have a smile on your face, and you should, always say nice things to people, and you should wave and shake their hands. And now all those things are probably true. Having a pleasant demeanor are good things and everything, but it's so much deeper than that, which I think we'll see. So let's jump in first to this article that I saw that kind of got me thinking about this in more recent terms. This is from Axios, but it kind of gets us their data from the American Survey Institute or something like that. I'll link these in the show notes. But so it says the number of close friendships that Americans have has declined over the past several decades. Now, this is just a chart, and they kind of make a couple comments about this. But as you can see on there, in 1990, the number of people who said I have 10 or more close friendships went from 33 down to 13. Now, as we'll look at, we might need to define what a close friendship is. That's kind of an ambiguous term. Maybe 13 is even kind of hard to have 13 close friends. But you also see kind of even the more scary statistic is in 1990, only 3% of people reported having no close friends, as opposed to now in 2021, 12% of people, so that's over 10% of people report having zero close friends. Now, again, it could be much higher than that because people who say I've got one or two or three close friends, that might not actually be a close friend, but they're just calling it that. But that's a staggering statistic. If you can imagine having being in a church of 100 people, you look around at 10%, over 10% of the people there have no close friends. Those are people that are falling through the cracks and basically are unable to live out the life of Christ on a very meaningful level. Because how can you show patience, show love, show forgiveness, show hospitality if you don't have any relational framework in which to do it? So that's a major problem. And they comment on this. They say, new research shows Americans have fewer friends than in the past and are less likely to have a best friend. Why does it matter? At a time of excruciating mental and societal stress, this is another sign that we're breaking apart. And the friendship drought could get worse with more people working remotely or hybridly. So here are two key findings from May polling by the Survey Center of American Life, a project of the American Enterprise Institute. Our number of close friends has declined considerably from 30 years ago, when 33% of U.S. adults reported having 10 or more close friends, not counting relatives. Now 13% only say that. And then in 1990, 75% of us said we had a best friend. This year, that's down to 59%. So it's like almost 25% decrease. Not good. And so it kind of goes into a little bit more depth on the data here in this article called The State of American Friendship: Change, Challenges, and Loss. So just a couple points. It talks about the COVID pandemic is obviously a major culprit in some of this. So it says, first, Americans are marrying later than ever and more geographically mobile than in the past. Two trends are strongly associated with increasingly rates of self-reported social isolation and feelings of loneliness. So people are getting married later, which means, I don't necessarily see how that would correlate to having not a lot of friends, but maybe just not being able to form relationships. I'm not sure. But definitely the more geographically mobile in the past. I mean, this is something that I think that the church has to, I don't want to say harp on more, but it definitely has to preach on more, is our culture views relationships as disposable. And so it is not uncommon for a person to drop everything and just move to another state because they have a job opportunity, or I just want to change in my life, or I don't know, the grass is greener on the other side, or I don't know, I'm just sick of this place that I'm at. And you have to understand how damaging that is to relationships. It puts them on the back burner. It makes them secondary. Now, of course, there are things that happen. People have to move sometimes, but I do really think that we ought to stress, especially in the body of Christ. But it's hard. It's hard to do this because, again, people don't have friendships and relationships that mean anything to them. So it's very easy for them to say, "Well, do I stay locked into this job at this home at this place in this town so I can be around people that I see for 45 minutes every Sunday morning?" I don't really see the appeal of that. Of course, pack up and move your whole family and everyone with, that you happen to be close with, that live within your four walls, and move them across the country. But I think that's a problem. We ought to have such deep relationships that it's a hard thing to say, man, I don't want to move. This is my family. These are my friends. These are people that I have invested in and have invested in me for a long time. When you invest in something, it's valuable to you. It's worth a lot to you. It's like you're not going to just easily throw that away. So this mobility, this is a major problem. This article goes on to say, second, American parents are spending twice as much time with their children compared to previous generations, crowding out other types of relationships, including friendships. So this delay in getting older and maturing, and you're living with your parents longer so they take care of you. You don't necessarily have to go out and depend on yourself and build your own social network of people to support you. And this is, finally, Americans are working longer hours and traveling more for work, which may come at the cost of maintaining and developing friendships. And so I think, again, this is an issue that the church has to address more. This idea of of work and careerism is not just, it's not just something that we just plucked out of the air and said this is a damaging thing. This is harmful to Christianity. So you need to choose. I mean, most people don't even realize it's a problem. They just think, well, I can glorify Jesus and work 80 hours a week at my job. Well, you can glorify Jesus in certain ways, meaning you can testify about him at work, you can share him with your coworkers. I mean, you can certainly do all those things, but the bulk of Christian life is lived out in relationships. How are you building deep, intimate relationships with something like that? You're dedicating that much time to your career, and what people say is we're going more and more to where people say, "Well, my close friends are my coworkers," and as we'll see, those aren't close friendships. I mean, they may be in rare exceptions, but usually, what close friendships look like when we say, "Oh, my coworker is my close friend," is, well, I see them every day. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you're friends with that person. I mean, how much how much time are you willing to spend with that person outside of work? Are you just basically like, once I'm done with work, I don't talk to that person again. I don't think about them. We don't hang out. I mean, that's not a friend. That is an acquaintance that happens to be in, and if they get fired or they leave and find another job, it's like they're out of my life. They are no longer that. So you see, that's not a friend. That's just a coworker. And you can certainly be kind and gentle and everything. The life of Christ can be manifested to your coworkers, but these are not friends. They are not friends just because they are coworkers, I guess I should say. So this article goes on. Most Americans have faced significant personal challenges over the past 12 months. More than 1 in 5 Americans say the past 12 months have been more difficult for them than usual. Women report having had more challenging time than men did. More than 1 in 4 women say the past 12 months have been much more difficult than usual. Middle-aged men in particular report having a significant easier time than other Americans did. Only 14% of middle-aged men report the past 12 months have been much more difficult, while 43% say it has not been any different than usual. That woman part seems to be significant. And they go on. They say the financial devastation brought about by COVID-19 has been well documented, but less widely reported, and the emotional toll on Americans they face as the result of the quarantine requires self-imposed social isolation. It says young women, nearly 1 in 10 Americans report having lost touch with their most of their friends. So 1 in 10, 10% of people over the past 12 months they've lost contact with them. Young women appear to have been more affected than most were. Nearly 6 in 10, almost 60%, report having lost touch with at least a few friends, and 16% say they are no longer in regular contact with most of their friends. So, and you think about the church, this is kind of one of those demographics that people say, why is the church mostly reaching women, and why do women seem to be the bulk of the... Again, that's not to say that women aren't important, but why are men not attracted to the church? Women seem to be making up the bulk of the church, and bulk of the volunteers, and bulk of the helpers in church, and doing a lot of the work of the church. And so there's this appeal to women, but now women seem to be getting hit the hardest with these relational struggles, which relationships is where the life of Christ is lived out and manifested. It's manifested with other people in close, intimate relationships. So it says, continues on, not surprisingly, Americans who have more friends report higher levels of satisfaction. Well, imagine that, with the number of friends they have. In fact, levels of satisfaction move linearly. As Americans accumulate additional friends, their level of satisfaction grows. Among Americans without any close friends, only 29% report being completely or very satisfied with the number of friends, less than 4 in 10. Americans with only 1 close friend, 43% of those with 2 or 3 close friends report being completely or very satisfied. A majority, 56% of Americans with 4 or 5 friends say that they are completely or very satisfied. 2/3, 67% of Americans with between 6 and 9 friends are completely or very satisfied. 3/4, 75%, with 10 or more close friends express this level of satisfaction. So the more friends you have, the more happy you are. Now, again, that probably has a tipping point where eventually you have so many friends. Oh, everyone's my best friend. It's like, well, that's not possible. And you're probably not getting a lot of satisfaction out of that. But of course this makes sense. In this, in the last episode, I talked about the Christian life being boring. And I was intentionally trying to, shock and kind of, make a point. Again, I didn't say it wasn't fulfilling, and I didn't say that there wasn't joy in it, but all this excitement and like rah rah rah, and the show and the entertainment and stuff. It's like that's not what Christianity is. Christianity is living your life every single day, and that includes friendships, relationships. That's where the joy and the excitement in Christian life comes from, is having these relationships with people, having this intimacy with different people. That's where the excitement comes. You see somebody who's growing in their walk with the Lord. They shared their faith with somebody. That's exciting. You pray with them and you see God answer. Those things are exciting and they become normative, but those are happening in relationships, and that's just what life is just it's not every other month or 2 months or every 6 months there's a big huge event and the worship is off the wall and you have a dynamic speaker come in and they recharge, or every year you go to camp or you go to a conference and you get recharged. And I mean, those things can be fine, but that's not what the Christian life. It's not from year to year having these exciting grand adventures with Jesus. And it's like, no, it's every day with these friends and these relationships that we've built. And so this article, like I said, goes on talking about our level of friendships, and this loop has gone back to that to reiterate this chart and included it later in this article. Again, that idea that in 1993 only 3% had no close friends, and in 2021 12% have no close friends. I mean, this is devastating. There is no way you can live the Christian life not in relationship. I mean, we talk about like monks, these spiritual, so spiritual. They sit alone in a room for 5 years and they just pray, and that is not Christianity. I mean, I don't know what that is. That's like being a prisoner, I guess. I don't know. But that is not Christianity. You cannot live the life of Christ. The life of Christ was lived in relationships. I mean, that's what the whole thing was. That's why the incarnation matters, because God was saying, I want to have a relationship with these people. I want to be brothers and sisters with these people. To have a relationship, he had to become human to have that relationship with us. That is the center post of Christianity in the Christian life. So it makes absolutely no sense that we would say, oh yeah, you can live the Christian life, but how many close friends do you have? Well, I don't really have any. How many intimate friends you have? Oh, well, that's none. Well, my wife maybe. Yeah, I'd count that. I mean, that's not enough. To say that your spouse is your only intimate friend, that's dangerously close to Jesus saying, if you love only those who love you, what credit is that? I mean, of course you're supposed to love your spouse and have an intimate relationship with your spouse. The Christian life has to be much more than that.
If you've been a listener of Faith and Focus for a while, I would encourage you to become a supporter of the ministry by becoming a monthly donor. Your generous donations allow me to continue working within Faith and recording new content. You can find a link to my donation page in the show notes for this episode. Thank you.
If we go on, I want to talk a little bit about this book. I think I've referenced it in the past. Again, I'll link it in the show notes in case you want to buy it. This is from an old print of it. It's when it was called Spiritual Relationships That Last. It's now been reprinted and kind of expanded a little bit to include a little bit, to be less of like a dating book and to be more of just a relationship book. But it's been updated to be called Spiritual Love, and it's by Dennis McCallum and Gary Delashmutt, two pastors down at Dwell Community Church. And in this book, again, it was marketed sort of as like a dating marriage book, but its foundation is one of how to form friendships and build relationships. And they talk about different qualities of relationships that there are. And so they say here there's a chapter on level of friendships and depth of friendships. And it says, personal relationships vary in depth and quality. For the purpose of this discussion, we will describe 3 general levels of friendship: casual, close, and intimate. With each level of friendship, we will also discuss 3 areas of sharing, each of which is present in proper measure in a healthy relationship. These areas are common experience, personal inner working, and emotional sharing. So these are three things that in every relationship, if you've got a healthy relationship, these three things will be there to a certain level. So before going on, let's consider definitions for each of these areas of sharing. The next page compares these levels of relationships in chart form. So common experience. So to share a common experience means we spend time and do things with those we love. By sharing experiences together, we develop a base of shared memories and feelings that become part of our relationship. While Christian love can be practiced in new relationships, Jesus clearly did this, the deeper Christian love relationships will require more common experience. So, right, you probably have your friendships where it's like you always reminisce about things. Oh, remember when this happened? Remember when that funny thing? Oh, that was hysterical. Oh, man, that was traumatic. You have these common shared experiences. Well, those don't happen by default. Those happen because you're just spending time to one another, and then life happens to you. Funny things happen to you. Tragic things happen. You know, crazy things. Just life. Weird, bizarre things happen, and that builds common experience. That's why, again, relationship building and discipleship. So discipleship is right. It's just relationships and friendships, but focused on the goal of seeing somebody matured to become more like Christ. And that's all discipleship is. So friendship is just, okay, we're spending time together with that goal and that aim. And that's why a lot of discipleship is just, people think it has to be like a class. Well, I can't teach a class. I can't teach no, a lot of it is, let's go to the grocery store together. And then something crazy happens at the grocery store, some crazy woman freaks out and starts throwing things around. That creates common shared experience that you look back on and you think, man, like, how did we respond to that? Did we respond in a Christ-like manner, or did we, take out our phones and videotape her going crazy? So these things are things that bond, that unite us and create these bonds. They also go on to talk about, if I can get it to click through. Maybe? Yeah. So personal inner working. To share our personal inner working with another means we choose to reveal what's inside, our hopes, fears, dreams, struggles, and other personal matters. Personal inner working also refers to our accumulating knowledge of the person's internal makeup. This kind of sharing is communication. We can measure the communication in a relationship by how much we are learning and disclosing about what makes us tick on the inside. This understanding should go in both directions in a healthy relationship. And then the other thing is emotional sharing. Emotional communication means we share our feelings and understand one another's feelings. Because we are created with emotions, an unemotional relationship is incomplete. In each level of relationship, we should not only feel emotion, but effectively communicate our feelings, especially those feelings that will edify or nurture our loved one. For instance, we may think we have communicated affection, but if the other person has not sensed the affection, our communication has been ineffective. So people like myself who are bad at communicating emotion, that's harder, in very casual relationships. People who are very, extroverted, they're very type A, they can probably communicate affection very easily. And so it's easy to form bonds with people, and it's easy to form those relationships. And a lot of those times people are like, everyone is my best friend. Well, it's because there was almost like an immediate emotional sharing, and you're able to share what's going on and how you feel and all that kind of stuff. Those people may be more challenged to build deep relationships with people because they're so, spread out over all these different relationships. So they go on to these different levels of relationships. So they talk about a casual relationship. And this is where, I talked about people say, well, I've got no close friends, or I've got 10 close friends. Well, what really is a close friend? How do you define a close friend? Is my coworker my close friend? Well, maybe, but not because you see them every day. That is not what a close relationship looks like. So they talk about a casual relationship, and then the common experience you have is very sporadic. There's very sporadic contact. Tends to be short-term and somewhat superficial. So, it's like we might have a close mutual friend. It might be somebody who, comes into town every other week or something, and you might see them. Maybe it's somebody you just see at church, once a week. I mean, that's not a close friendship. If you see them once a week, that's sporadic. That's sporadic contact, and it's superficial. So the personal inner working is general. There's general searching into the other's interests, goals, likes, and dislikes, background, spiritual experiences, priorities, problems, and frustrations. And there might be visible interest and warmth, but there's not this great probing in. So this, like you can kind of see sporadic impact and just kind of casually probing at someone's inner working. This might still be indicative of a close relationship, but that might characterize a lot of even like small groups where we see each other once a week or once every other week, and we kind of maybe share some things that we're thinking about, but it's not very deep. And so then with emotional sharing, there's visible interest or warmth and enthusiasm. There's a politeness, means negative feelings are only shared if necessary and then very carefully. So you don't want to rock the boat on these casual relationships. We don't know, is that person going to freak out? Are they going to get depressed? Are they going to start crying? Are they going to run away? What are they going to do? We don't know. So just, be really careful. We're not going to share too deep with a casual relationship. So close relationship is regular time spent. So we feel the need to maintain time spent. Quality time is included. So there's shared goals and interests. This might be like, a close church friend, maybe even a coworker. You might spend some regular time with them, meaning like, hey, let's, once a week, let's go out to grab drinks or go bowling as a whatever. We try to do a game night. Let's play games once a week. So there's regular time there, and we try to maintain that. There's freedom to ask pointed personal questions about others' relationships, feelings, etc. So you're beginning to understand each other's deeper problems and potentials, and you're able to promote others' potential and help the problem. So this is kind of where you're starting to get more where I think the church should have more close relationships. It's deeper than casual, but it's not an intimate relationship. But we can maintain several of these close relationships. Jesus, his 12 disciples were probably close friends. They regularly were spending time together, and there was some depth, and it was important. And then there's loyalty and affection and gratitude, more honest about disappointments, but also careful to encourage. So you're starting to get a little bit more intentional about how you encourage, how you challenge. This would be, once you've gotten to know a person for a while. And typically if a person goes to a close friendship too soon, it kind of gets awkward. Like, hey, I'm not there yet. We don't have that level of friendship. And I'm afraid that most people, when they say they have no close friends, they never get to this level. This is a lot of people in our culture because, again, this is why we say careerism and dedication to things other than relationships, whether it's career, whether it's hobbies, whether it's just your own personal comfort and just vegging out in front of the TV by yourself or playing video games all the time. Like, the reason why those things are so damaging is not because they are necessarily sinful in and of themselves, but they're distracting from the ability to build these things. Close friendships don't just happen automatically. You have to work to move beyond a casual friendship to a close friendship. You can't do that if your time is just diffused through a bunch of other relatively less important things. And I do say relatively less important because as much as you think your job is important or whatever it is that you think is important, remember, Paul told the Thessalonians, who is my crown? Who is my crown and my reward on the day of judgment before Christ? What is going to bring me the joy? It's you, Thessalonians. It's this relationship that I have with you. That is what's important on the day of judgment. It's not your job. It's not what you did for Jesus because you built such and such a job and such a thing, and you boosted the local economy by X, Y, and Z, and you employed so many people, and even that you were a good employer and you were nice. I mean, those are good things. You can bring the life of Christ to those things. But ultimately, if people aren't coming to faith in Christ or being discipled and the life of Christ isn't being lived out in relationships where discipleship can happen, all those things are going to ultimately go away. They're going to be burned up. So he goes on to an intimate relationship. So this is extensive time commitment. Availability has few limits. Shared worlds include shared goals, activities, and other people. So this is where it's like, this is extensive time. This is like, you spend this time with this person and almost nothing will stop you. I mean, you've got to be in a car wreck and in a coma in the hospital to be like, I'm spending time with these people there. This person, and this is where you could probably only have like one or two of these. I mean, and these are lifelong friends where it's like, nothing is going to stop me from spending time with this person. It's understood that this is one of the most important things to me. And again, this is probably a spouse, but it can't only be your spouse. That's not good enough. So there's complete open communication. Common commitment to develop each other's characters. Affirmation and confrontation occurs both ways, so there's accountability. expressing the same feelings as under a close relationship, but even more freedom to share openly. Emotional giving is constructive and controlled. There's commitment to shared, positive, nurturing feeling for the sake of the others, even when it's not spontaneous. Um, and of course, with this intimate relationship, there's a significant backlog of common experience. This is not something that you fall into in a month or 2 months. This is something that takes a long time to build. So he continues on, and he says, on a piece of paper, write a list of your friends and compare the areas of sharing in each of the types of relationships given in chapter 3. So if you get this book, or just even think about it, write down your friends and try to kind of lump them in. Is this person really a casual or close or an intimate friend? So this example they give is John. They have common experience, they have sporadic contact. We sometimes have meaningful talk, but usually not. Personal inner working. We discuss some personal areas, but I don't feel the freedom to ask him about all the areas of his life. Sometimes I sense he's holding back. So can't rock this boat too much. I got to be careful. We might take a step back to just a casual relationship. And there's not much overt sharing expressed towards one another. We only express emotion when we watch football. So this description, when compared with the chart, indicates this relationship as a casual one. Naturally, most of our relationships will be casual. Your people at work, your coworkers at work, those are casual relationships. This is not bad. However, if all of our relationships are casual, we have reason to question our ability to build an intimate relationship in marriage. Again, why do married couples report that they have problems relating to their friends before marriage, but they never had problems relating to their friends before marriage, but suddenly they have problems with their spouse once they're married? The likely reason is that the intimacy test of our relationship skills more than surface relationships ever do. Relational problems that may go unnoticed in our single lives cannot hide in the face of marital intimacy. So what they're saying is if you've just got casual relationships with your coworkers, it's like, I never knew I had a problem forgiving people. Well, yeah, because you have casual relationships with everyone. Nobody's offended you enough to have to forgive them. They might bother you, and it's like, whatever, it's not that big of a deal. But you've never had to forgive somebody a radical wrong they've committed to you if you just have a casual relationship with them. Those are things that come out in an intimate relationship where somebody shares or hurts you emotionally, and now you really have to decide, can I forgive this person? Can I be patient with this person now that I have to? I spend all this time with them. A lot of these problems don't show up until marriage. It says this is the best reason for seeking and developing intimate relationships before marriage, especially in non-romantic friendships. If we are not successfully loving people at the intimate level before marriage, what makes us think we will be able to do so after marriage? Likewise, if we are married but have no intimate relationships outside of marriage, perhaps the problem is not with our spouse after all. So, friendships, the fact that our culture, we looked at in those articles, our culture does not know how to form relationships. And the church, in just taking on our culture and going with the stream of our culture, has failed to know how to build relationships as well. We don't know how to have friendships. We don't know how to build friendships. We don't know what that even looks like. So therefore, the life of Christ, which can only be lived out in friendships, casual, then close, and then intimate relationships, we don't know how to do that. We're crippled by our relational immaturity, so we can't live out the life of Christ. So then what is called the life of Christ becomes very superficial. We shrink it down to almost nothing, where it's just waving with a smile on your face and shaking people's hands and maybe giving them a side hug or something. That's the life of Christ. Oh, our church is just such a loving church. Really? Has anyone called you in the week to see how you're doing? Has anyone checked in on you? You're depressed and anxious and you thought about killing yourself. Does anyone at the church know? Are you able to talk to anybody at your church? Oh, but they wave at us when we come in and they offer us coffee. Well, that is not a friendship, and that is not the life of Christ. That is, I don't know what that is. That's like walking into Walmart and having a greeter wave at you. I mean, that's what we expect from our Walmart greeters. That's not the life of Christ. So my exhortation to you would be, if you want an exciting and fulfilling Christian life, it comes through relationships. And if it's not coming through relationships, there's a good chance you're seeking it through experiences, through exciting things, through cheap gimmicks, and you're watering down what Christ has for you, the thing that might be truly exciting in the Christian life. So check out that book, Spiritual Love. spiritual relationships that last. Again, I'll link them. And then go through your friendships. Do you have close friends? Do you have intimate friendships? Is your marriage struggling in intimacy? Well, is it because you don't know how to have an intimate relationship? It's never too late to try. Christ can start working on that right now. And if you're not married, you can start working on it right now with Christ, building those friendships, moving from casual to close, from close to intimate with some of them. So that would be my encouragement to you and my exhortation to you. And so I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll see you next time.
While Faith in Focus is a ministry of mine as a missionary with InFaith, the views and opinions expressed, believed, or lived out by myself or those appearing in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the position, beliefs, or opinions of InFaith as a mission.